Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our Silicon Global Online series. I think many of you have been with us before and you know the drill. Here's a little bit about what we're all about, Silicon Dragon Ventures, with our newsletter, our membership, our VC series, our videos, and our books as well. So there's my 3 books, Silicon Dragon, Startup Asia, Tech Titans of China, and a new one coming up. There's a little hint about what it might be about, but no more hints beyond that. So for those of you who have joined us today, you know all about the Circle membership, and I really appreciate you joining and being a part of our Circle. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our VCs for our angels for tonight, band of angels. We have Daniel Gould and Dan Schwartz, 2 Dans. That's great. So we're going to have a Q&A and I'll introduce them and you can ask a question as we get into the conversation. So you can either write that in the chat or I may call on you to ask a question. So be ready. Okay. Now let me introduce Dan Schwartz. He is also with the Band of Angels, these 2. Dan has 40 years of experience in finance and publishing industries. He's turned around a struggling financial publication, which I know very well, and he founded a digital media delivery platform for print media, and that was Kiosk. And of course, he's the former Nevada State Treasurer, 2015 to 2019. He revamped the state's investment program, quintupling the returns on the general fund. He also launched a college savings program aimed at creating a culture of education in Nevada. And he successfully questioned the Faraday Future Project in North Las Vegas, saving Nevada taxpayers $175 million in defaulted bonds. So Dan, that's your China experience coming in there, isn't it?
It is, Rebecca. In fact, if anyone's curious, I can answer questions, but I did the due diligence that confirmed my suspicions was actually done in situ in China. So it all came together for the benefit of the Nevada taxpayer.
Very good. I'm sure there's a big story behind that. If we have time, maybe we'll get to that a little bit later. But very interesting that a lot of the due diligence took place in China. So we know that very few people in the US know China as well as you do, actually. So,
yeah, no, thank you. I certainly know it better than most other elected politicians. So we'll leave it at that.
Okay. He's
Most,
from
if
Chicago.
not all.
What?
Most, if not all.
Most, if not all. Okay. All right. And here we go with his educational credentials, Princeton, Boston University, Columbia. Okay, good for you, Dan. And also Daniel Gould, JD Columbia. And also I love this undergraduate degree in music, science, and technology. I'd love to hear about that degree. It sounds so creative from Stanford. And then Daniel has this very interesting background of being combining media, advertising, music. He's been an entrepreneur. He founded 2 startups. One of them is Wax Orchard, which is another great name. So he's had a lot of experience in this area. And now he's currently the business development director for Alexa at Amazon. So I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more about that. Okay, so for tonight, as I said, please write your questions into the chat box. And I may call on you, so be ready for that. And so without further ado here, I'm going to start the fireside chat. And as you can see, I figured I might as well use it, right? The only thing I haven't done is I light the fire, but I think maybe we'll light the fire tonight conversationally. Okay, Daniel, I mean, could you tell us a little bit about your background? How did you get into science and technology and music all combined? I'd love to hear more about it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rebecca. So I grew up studying music. I played the saxophone in a jazz band. I took classical piano lessons as a kid. And so I really loved music growing up. And when I went to college, I ended up studying computer science and music. And there was this graduate program at Stanford called Music Science Technology. It was at the center called the Center for Computer Research in Music and Acoustics. And a lot of the people that have come out of that school have gone on to some of the big gear companies like Roland and Yamaha and Digidesign and so on for music production, software and hardware. So I was lucky that they actually opened up a program for undergraduates. And I was able to do this special major that combined those two interests I had.
Okay, that's wonderful. And you certainly have used it with your career progression as well. So what do you like more? I mean, you've been an entrepreneur, you've been on the corporate side, you've been in the music distribution side. What are these? Which one of these is really is your favorite?
Well, yeah. So I started a few startups in the first part of my career after undergrad, and I worked early at a few others. And then later, I went on to work at much bigger companies, Microsoft and Intel and Sony, and now I'm at Amazon for the second time. I actually worked at Amazon for a brief time in the early 2000s for just a year, back when people called it a startup. They don't anymore. They call it big tech now, right? But anyway, I think I like working on new projects, creating new industries, and sometimes that's done in a small company and sometimes it's done in a very big company. The reason I ended up at Sony PlayStation is because they were making an internet TV service, live TV service called PlayStation View, and they were one of the few companies that was doing that. It was a service that I was passionate about, and so if you wanted to work on that, there weren't a lot of startups that you could go to work on that. It was mostly happening at bigger companies. Sling was another big one from Dish, which is a very big company. So I would say for me, it's less about the size of the company and more about the team you're on and the project and the service you're building.
Well, you certainly have been in some interesting companies, the leading companies in media and tech and innovation. Which one of these would you say is leading for the future? Is it Amazon? Is it Google? Is it Facebook, Twitter, TikTok? Who is it?
Yeah, that's interesting because I think that there's a lot of innovation that happens at the startup level and then it quickly becomes acquired. Like people don't even remember now that TikTok, which is part of ByteDance, a lot of people don't remember they bought Musical.ly, which was the start of the virality of people lip syncing, to these music videos. And Musical.ly was a small company. I remember when they first started. And similarly, like as everybody knows, Instagram was a very small company when Facebook acquired it, right? And now it's everywhere. But I think in terms of media, for big tech, Amazon and Apple have really leaned in heavily to becoming media companies. I mean, the investment that and I'm not speaking for my division, I'm working in Alexa, but I'm talking about Amazon Prime Video. The investment they've made in original content is at a scale that you can't really call it an experiment anymore. There was a time when you could, and there's things that Amazons and Googles of the world and Facebook's will try for a little while and then throw away because it didn't work out, right? I mean, Google does that with some sort of social chat service like every few years. No offense to Google, I love Google, but there are these things that are experiments, but like that's not really an experiment anymore, I don't think, for Amazon. And it's competing head to head now with Netflix. Similarly, like Apple, has created now a suite of entertainment services. And although no one of them has huge market share, like between, with the exception of Apple Music, but I'm talking about like Apple TV Plus, Apple, the games, Apple Arcade, some of the more recent services they launched. I think they're all part of an ecosystem of entertainment where you have to say like they are, heavily invested in entertainment services. So I think they're going to continue to be really important, going forward. But I also think that, Netflix is going to be extremely important in media. And And I think there's a lot of smaller companies that are innovating and are doing interesting things. Some of them are in VR and AR. Those tend to get acquired. There's also companies in podcasts and they get acquired by Spotify or Apple. They're doing a lot with storytelling in the last couple of years. And let's see what else. Like, I think companies that are finding new ways to marry the origination of original IP with technology, and this is something Dan and I've talked about a lot, are super interesting. Like Hello Sunshine is an example. They just got bought, that Reese Witherspoon's company. But like there's a couple companies like this that are saying like, how do we create original IP stories, but then marry it with whatever is the hottest tech trend? And those are usually smaller companies that end up getting acquired by bigger ones. And I think they're going to drive a lot of the innovation in the industry.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So as in your current role as business development director at Alexa at Amazon, what kinds of new things are you working on?
Well, I can't talk too much about that. Amazon is pretty secretive, not as bad as Apple, but pretty secretive as far as brand new things. There were big announcements about Alexa hardware yesterday in the news. Half of those things I didn't know about internally. It's kind of like, need to know. But I'll tell you that I work with some of the biggest music partners, Spotify and SiriusXM Pandora and these folks. And there is increasing innovation in sort of creator-centric features. I think there's been a lot in the press, certainly that Spotify has said about this, because they're trying to deal with some negative PR and perceptions, right, around their payment rates to artists. So they've really leaned into trying to do things that benefit artists and have more artist services. Whether they actually, as some people theorize, eventually become the major record label, I don't know. But they're trying to help artists more than just the distribution of their albums alone on a streaming basis. So I mean, there's some things that we're working on related to facilitate that kind of
Right.
benefits. And then also there's personalization. Amazon is always in every field, concerned with customer personalization. And you can see that in some of the features that we've launched in the last year around recommendation and discovery. And then we work to reduce friction and make it easier for people to just access music wherever they are. Music is the #1 use case for smart speakers and virtual assistants in the world. And people expect it to be really easy to access on any device at any time with no latency. People, the customer has very high expectations, and we, work on meeting those expectations for the jukebox in the sky.
Okay, it's a lot to absorb, actually, and it's a lot to stay on top of all these trends that are happening because this field is, so quickly evolving. So how do both of you stay abreast of the latest and greatest?
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, let me take a quick, just back up a little bit. For those of you who are wondering why there are two people here, Daniel and I are co-chairs of what's known as the Digital Media Entertainment SIG, the Special Interest Group of the Angels. I'm a bit of a dinosaur. I started a company in 1998 called Kiosk, with a Q instead of a K. And we were the first platform to digitally deliver print media, specifically magazines. And I think I can comfortably say if we tried to start this company today, we probably couldn't get funding. And if we did, we would be out of business shortly thereafter. So I think, and a lot of credit to Daniel. Daniel really is kind of on the forefront. I mean, we actually, I enjoy being co-chair with him, but he is really knowledgeable and into the whole entertainment area. We've looked at a number of companies. We can talk about this later. Virtual reality, music. We saw a company that was had just the other day helps you write songs, and they have a new twist to that. There are other companies in the space. We looked at a company called Red. What was that? Red Pill? Yeah, Red Pill.
Yeah, it was Red Pill. Yeah.
Yeah, Red Pill, which has created a whole AR, VR scenario. What it reminds me of is, for those of you who remember back in the day, Star Trek, when Captain Kirk would go to the holodome and he would immerse himself in whatever his favorite memory was. This is very similar. You put on an Oculus and you're immediately put into a platform where all of the, and this is their differential advantage, where you can interact with the dancers and the music and the DJ. But I think, yeah, it's pretty incredible what's going on. I think I'll let Daniel speak, but I think I'm learning. I mean, it's amazing the stuff that we're looking at in terms of the whole music, VR, AR sort of space. So
how do you decide what startups to look at? I mean, you must get pitched by hundreds. How do you select them?
Well,
Daniel, yeah, go ahead, yeah.
yeah, there's a few different ways. I mean, one is I to some extent am in touch with the different accelerators around here, YC and Techstars, and so that provides a useful filter, honestly. There's also the Band of Angels. There are specialists, there are these special interest groups, like Dan said, and there's a lot of people that he and I can consult with there that could provide guidance on how to filter out what's worth digging into more from the initial pitch. But honestly, it is challenging. We live in a world where it's easy for everyone to reach everyone else, right? Communications have a lot of the friction taken out of them, which is wonderful. It's especially great during era of COVID, right? We can all do these video chats. But it also means, yeah, you're just like bombarded with contacts and have to decide how to prioritize. I think, it's trying to look at trends and have a really clear idea of what trends you care about the most and then focus on those. I mean, Dan has actually taught me a little bit about that, because I tend to be kind of sector agnostic and look at it like, oh, does the founder seem really smart, or does the product seem really innovative and cool? But that can pull you in a lot of different directions. There's a lot of smart people, a lot of innovative products. And Dan kind of, when we first started talking, he had some very specific things he was looking for, like the holodeck, like he said, or or in Star Trek, when Princess Leia is on the hologram communicating, right? We've spent a lot of time looking at holographic projection technology companies, hardware companies doing really advanced stuff with optics. In my mind, some of it's more advanced than the cutting edge of AR and VR, which are already being commercialized. This is stuff that isn't even really fully commercialized yet, but it comes from sci-fi, right? And so, like I think he had certain clear visions of, like, there are these particular kinds of experiences and worlds that that would be that would provide great investment opportunities and would be exciting to back and work with. I read a lot to also keep up. Like, I read a ton of news. I read a bunch of newsletters that I've signed up to on Substack or Medium or whatever. There's people I follow on LinkedIn that provide great news articles, or Twitter. So there's a lot of social media feeds that I've filtered and curated over the years.
What's more important for you, the actual journalist behind it, the writer or the contributor behind it, or the actual media outlet?
That's a great question. For me, it tends to be the writer, honestly. I mean, there's some exceptions to that, though, but
Yeah.
I mean, there's also certain places, though, where you're getting information from a community, like, say, Reddit, right? There's not all sectors, but there's certain tech sectors where you can learn more from what people are talking about on Reddit, or like Hacker News. Like for example, software developer tools. If you want to talk about no-code software developer tools, like, I don't think it's that useful to read a newsletter. I want to go see what people are, like, developers are talking about on Reddit or Hacker News. Whereas, like, for certain other sectors, it may not be that helpful. So it kind of depends on how much you want to tap the crowd, the wisdom of the crowd, right? Versus try and find like in media, there may be a guy who writes articles that a lot of people read, like Michael Ball or Ben Thompson with Stratechery or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So some of these guys, like, it's about the writer, and then for other things, for other sectors, for me, it's about the community. I don't know, it varies.
Yeah, that's one of the things that changed with social media, the advent of social media, where, at one point they were saying, well, if you have like thousands of followers on Twitter, you could actually be paid to reach that audience of those followers. But we haven't really come to that yet, have we?
Well, there is a very hot sector, I would say, that I don't invest in much, but I see a lot of deals, which is new marketplaces for marketing directly through what I'd call small to medium-sized social influencers, as opposed to small and medium-sized businesses, right? Like
Influencers, yeah.
And trying to like aggregate that and somehow intelligently use it to pay those people to market things. And that is a very hot space to try and figure out how to do that. I don't think I'm an expert on that. I haven't made many investments there, but there's certainly a lot of startups working on it.
Right. So a lot of ideas, new media ideas, have come from China. For instance, Musical.ly was actually from Shanghai.
Right.
And many people don't know that. And many people don't know that TikTok is also basically Chinese. And of course, WeChat has its own influence as well. But Korea and Japan, I'm interested in both of your perspectives, because both of you have international experience. What markets do you feel are leading the tech innovation in these fields? Korea, had Kakao, right? Japan was early in Yahoo, going way back, and then China has had one thing after the next. And actually, I think this key influencers idea came from China. One of the companies went public. I can't remember the name of YY. Was one of these ones where they had all these bells and whistles, and people would send virtual gifts, and these celebrity influencers became so popular. So I mean, what market? So what market do you think is driving it now? Is the U.S. driving it or not?
I think it varies. I'd like to know what Dan thinks on this one, because he does have actually more direct experience in Asia than I do, having lived there for a long time. I'll just say that I've seen a lot of deals on AngelList and that come to the band that say it's the insert Chinese company for insert non-Asian region. Like it's the Alibaba of LATAM, it's the Pinduoduo of Africa. Like you're saying, it's the Ant Financial of whatever. Like, so yes, you're absolutely right. Like there's a lot of tech companies in the last 5 or 6 years that are hugely influential, and there's clones popping up in other regions of the world. But there's also still a lot of companies outside the US that are cloned based on big US successes too. So, it depends on the sector. I would say the super app concept definitely, where you're integrating with chat, all these other services like ride sharing and delivery, definitely more of an influence on Asia, and Asia has been more successful, arguably. But some other things, like I would say fintech is more heavily influenced by some of the biggest successes in the US, that sector in particular. Same with prop tech, I would say. And real estate innovations, I feel like a lot of supply chain innovation in the US, tons of it. It depends on your sector. Dan, what do you?
Yeah, Dan.
Yeah, thanks. Dan, let me, I'm going to do two things. One is, which I think will help answer your question, Rebecca. Let's pick up some of these questions in the chat room.
Okay, well, let's get to those in a minute. Is that okay?
Two things. Going back to your original question, how do we decide? How do we pick? There's a lot of projects that we've looked at that are really just advanced science fair projects. And that quickly comes out after you talk to the people. Two, the deals, the other thing I would really recommend to people, and I've seen this time and time again, is in your pitches, always include a demo. This one company that we looked at the other day, I was pretty skeptical about, but the Myra, the lady did a demo, and I said, "Wow, this is really something." We looked at and just to the holographic, and this actually answers one of the questions in the chat box. We looked at a company in Australia, and you know, at first the toughest thing was trying to figure out the time schedule between the West Coast and Brisbane. We did nail that, but we had several conversations with them, and they've actually got a great technology in the holograph. Daniel's going to answer that, but they were hung up on a Daniel. What was the name of the game that they were?
Space Invaders.
Space
Yeah,
Invaders.
that was Voxon.
Yeah, Voxon. Yeah, they had a neat technology which we wanted to bring to the West Coast, and they had an offer from a Japanese company to help them with Space Invaders. So they kind of stopped speaking to us. But we saw 2 or 3 companies in the holographic space, and that I think is going to develop very rapidly. Was it holodeck or holodome? I think it was holodeck. Yeah, that's what it was with Captain Kirk. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll get off. And there's
I've seen some in some applications of that in the medical field.
Yeah, it's absolutely I think going to be huge, and it's going to really change the whole online delivery, and not necessarily online, but trade shows and all. Once you have sort of the Princess Leia demo ready to go. So yeah, that's.
And going back to the question about where do you think the internationally, and I would love to have your perspective on China, and do you think that China was leading some of these new advances in new media and tech?
Well, again, I'm somewhat of a dinosaur. For those of you who don't know, I was the publisher of the Asian Venture Capital Journal for 15 years, 93 to 2008, and that was. If you want, you can read about it in my book, which is on Amazon. The Future of Finance: How Private Equity and Venture Capital Will Change the World. But even the TikToks and the Tencents and the other companies, I don't think were really innovative. I think they were imitations, and Daniel, you may have an opinion on this, of companies in the US, and they just developed it a lot better than we did. Even WeChat was an extension of a company in the US, and the difference is they just happen to be a little more creative, and they also have 1.3 billion people in China. So it becomes a very fertile ground to build a business. I think a lot of, I'm not because I'm make America great again, but I really think America's really got some of the best innovation out there, and particularly the Silicon Valley. Daniel, you may have a thought on that, but I personally have not seen huge innovation outside of the U.S. and with the exception of Voxon, which was the holographic company, and I think they kind of headed off into the outer realms of the solar system when they went with Space Invaders. So yeah, I think it's happening in Silicon Valley. I mean, that's just me, and it's my perspective for having been around for 15, 20 years.
So the deals that you see as a group, as part of Band of Angels, are most of them local, Silicon Valley based, US based? Is there a way that?
Yeah, so Band of Angels does tend to like companies that are in the region. It's been a very in-person focused group historically. I mean, that's changed a bit because of COVID, right? But and it's certainly nothing wrong with having a thesis of looking for Bay Area or California companies for startups. A lot of people have done very well with that investing strategy. But I personally am really in favor of diversification, and I also believe there are opportunities to get lower valuations and bigger returns from companies outside the US lately. So I'm seeing a lot more, and this is actually reflected in the accelerators I mentioned earlier too, like Y Combinator and Techstars. I'm
Right.
seeing a lot more companies coming from outside the US, especially India and LATAM. I think in the last YC batch, India and LATAM together were a majority of the companies, like the companies that were focused. Now, I'm not talking about like where the company is organized. They might have been a US C Corp, but I'm saying as far as the customer market, I think it was a minority of companies that was actually focused on the US market this last batch. So that
Oh, I
tells you
see.
something.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think there's just a ton of growth in those regions, LATAM and India, in the last 5 years.
Right. So, and you're also a venture capitalist. So how does that work? You're a business development director at Alexa, and also a venture capitalist and Band of Angels. I mean,
Well, yeah, I'm
fun-
doing the investing on the side. It's like a second job.
I see.
So the way it works is a lot of hours of work, nights and weekends, I guess.
Okay. So are you busier now with since COVID or not?
I'm busier since COVID because, because there's a more of an expectation of always on, at least in the people I'm dealing with,
Right.
always on for video calls that wasn't there before.
Right.
So.
And
What about- yeah.
what format are you typically on for video calls or video meetings?
What format? You mean the app?
Like Zoom? Do you like Zoom?
Oh, it's almost all Zoom or Google Meet for me. There's a small number of folks that use that use WebEx or something, or Microsoft Teams or something else, but it's almost all Zoom or Google Meet. What about you, Dan?
I kind of joined in the middle of COVID. So Ian, who is the group chairman, said, there are people, including you, Dan, who've never been to a band dinner. I was at one, but typically, and this is a partial answer to your question, Rebecca, the band does a monthly dinner where after a company has sort of passed 2 or 3 preliminary steps, presents. And I've never done an in-person dinner. So, my experience is strictly with Zoom, and I really like it. Number one, I get to see people. And at AVCJ, Asian Venture Capital Journal, we used to do a lot of conferences, which were great. And I don't think Zoom works well for a big group, but for a small group, it's tremendous. All the investing I've done has been through Zoom, and I don't think it would have made any difference had I met these people in person. So I'm a big
Second that.
I see. So how many deals do you do per year, let's say, from your digital media entertainment sector? How many deals do you do every year?
The group was founded, again, I give credit to the powers to be at the band who asked Daniel and I to set up a digital media and entertainment group. We typically look at between 1 to 3 companies every month. And I think we've done about 2. One was a company which I really like called Overplay, which takes home videos and turns them into a game.
Oh.
And yeah, they're really in the genesis of their creation. Another one which the band funded was called Vertanza, which is an online sales company. In other words, they specialize in teaching people how to sell. And for those of you who've been to business school, you spend hours getting marketing theory, but no one ever teaches you how to sell. They do that. In response to one of the questions there, I invested in a company called QSecure, which is cybersecurity, which is red hot these days.
Yeah.
The conventional wisdom is that the Chinese are ahead of us by leagues, which I think is true. But DOD and the Valley are all doing all they can to catch up. So, and there was another company called Suave, which we had a call today on, and they had a few issues getting off the ground, as I learned, but their specialty is scanning different networks and finding the bugs, and they claim that they do it better and faster than anyone else. So those are some of them, they're pretty much Overplay is probably the only pure digital entertainment, really. Daniel, can you think of any others that we've?
Well, we as in the media and entertainment group within the band, Dan's right. Like it's been around less than a year, and we've only done like 2 deals. I'm sure we'll do more, but the band itself does, a couple every month, right, Dan? I mean,
Yeah.
The band itself is running over 20 a year for sure that they're investing in.
Okay, and so yeah, go ahead.
I'm personally, because I'm doing syndicates, and that involves, less of my own personal investment on AngelList in association with a venture fund. The number of deals I can do is higher. It can move faster. So, I mean, I'm doing 2 or 3 a month there. Like it's a lot. Like sometimes 1 a week. So it's
oh, wow.
Yeah.
And what stage are these? Are these really early startups? Or
Those
not?
are usually seed or Series A, not pre-seed. I've done 1 or 2 pre-seed, but usually it's not at the very beginning for the syndicates on AngelList. The investors there, LPs, tend to want to see a little bit of traction, a product done, a tiny bit of revenue, but anything beyond that is good. And then, yeah, usually runs up to like, there are some later stage deals on AngelList Series B and C, D, but I don't do that much of that work.
Okay.
It's a little bit different to get into those deals.
So since you had experience, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, just to footnote Daniel's comments. What we really like to see, or what most of the band, and we invest individually.
Okay.
Now, a group of individuals can get together and form a syndicate, which happens a lot. But many, if not many, of the band deals are all done by individual members. But we tend to like companies with a valuation in the $4 to $6 million range.
Okay.
I've gone up to 12 just because the guy took me out to dinner a couple of times, and I said okay. But
it must have been good steak.
They weren't, but the view was great, so I gave it for that, right? So yeah, I would say 4 to 8 million is the sweet spot. Much beyond 10, people get a little anxious. We looked at a company, I think Red Pill came back to us, and after I was pretty excited about it, they said, well, we're looking at a valuation of about 42 million. And I think Daniel and I looked at each other and said, great company. Let me know when you do your next startup. But that was kind of,
I see.
I think they may or may not have been worth it, but it just, the problem is when you do startup is these things don't happen overnight, and there's usually problems, and you're looking at about a 3 to 5 year tail. If you don't start out small, you get diluted beyond any sort of recognizable return. I don't know, Daniel, if you'd agree or.
Yeah, I mean, some early stage startups can be worth a lot more than the 4 to 6 million. It depends on the company and what their potential is, but in general, I tend to agree with Dan on that.
Okay, so
there's a lot of inflation, though, I think, in the last 5 years of valuations in general.
Yeah.
As a general phenomenon, because of a lot of money floating around. So it's hard to say.
Yeah, we may be. Do you think we're headed for a down cycle or not?
I don't think we are, to be honest.
Oh, so you think this is going to continue on for a few more years then, huh? We're already in what, we had Jim Robinson, a venture capitalist from RRE Ventures on last week, and he said, we're already 12 years into an upcycle. This is gonna end.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I think there's certain aspects of VC that could definitely get reined in based on changes to the macroeconomic environment. But I just don't feel like, I mean, and nobody knows, I don't feel like though there's risk of like a 2008 type event in the near future because of the current stance of governments all over the world on debt. Just doesn't feel like it.
Yeah.
But I don't know, you know, I honestly don't know. But so if you're talking about like a big crash, like I'm not fearing that right now. I do think there's crazy amounts of money piling into certain types of investment assets though, including seed, like some of the bigger funds like A16Z and Greycroft or whatever or Greylock, was it Greylock? They recently announced like really big funds, but just for seed stage investment.
Yeah.
Like that kind of thing can only go on for so long because if there's some sort of arbitrage value there, it gets bid away, right?
Right.
So that can't go on forever. Same thing with SPACs. Like I think SPACs are a useful vehicle to disrupt investment banks on IPOs, but I don't think they can continue to grow at the growth rate they've been growing as far as like total amount of money, you know?
Right.
That's my personal gut instinct on that. But so I think there's these like different, you know, and then crypto, like we could have a whole hour just on that,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about.
But I don't see like as the idea of like the whole economy having a big contraction right now. It doesn't feel like that to me.
Okay,
I
so,
don't know.
so
Well,
you
I'd agree with Daniel. I'm just amazed at the ideas and the innovation that I'm seeing. And I think, you know, yeah, I mean, I think the public markets are probably overbought and there'll probably be a correction.
Sure, correction. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think the whole seed and maybe early round investing is really driven by the innovation. And that is just happening at warp speed. Talk about, I invested about, say I got married when I got married, about 10 years ago in a company called Digital Currency Group. And for years and years, it did nothing. And then all of a sudden it kind of perked up in the last 2 or 3 years. But what Barry did is innovative. I mean, he bought into one of the great, I hope, one of the great innovations of our time. And I think that's and if you look at the whole digital revolution, again, if I'd started kiosks today, I would have gotten nowhere. But I think all these other companies that are really converting our world to digital are going to do phenomenally. So, you know, the question is finding those that are going to succeed. I mean, there's anyone who's done venture investing knows that just about every problem in the book can and will crop up. I mean, some that you wake up in the morning and say, geez, I didn't know that was a problem. Right. So I think that's an issue, but having said that, I'm actually very optimistic. And just in terms of the company I've seen in our special interest group.
Okay, so there's a question here about the metaverse. So, you know, every once in a while this term is propping up. So what about the metaverse? Is it real? How soon is it happening? Yeah.
Daniel, you want to handle that?
Metaverse.
I think we are a full generation away from it. Like, I think it's like my daughter's kids. I have a young daughter. She's like 2. I think it's like her kids that will experience what's in the movies of like an AR VR experience that feels extremely real, you know, with like super high quality graphics, potentially haptics where you can feel certain things, you know, all that. Like, I just think, yeah, I think it's another 20 or 30 years away personally, if I had to guess. Dan, what do you think? But I think it'll happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I think again, it's just, Rebecca, what you can't count on is just the speed of the innovation. And, going back to cybersecurity, the conventional wisdom in the industry, and I'm just in it as an investor in this company, is that by 2025, which is 3 years away, 3.5 years away, we will have completely moved to quantum computing.
Mhm.
And I don't know if any of you have actually seen a quantum computer. It's not like anything that you and I would recognize. So there's just a lot of money, time, and talent that's going into this. So like I said, I think it's really geographically independent. It's to a certain extent independent of larger market terms, but the bands market, venture investing, early seed investing, startup investing is really driven by the technology and the innovators out there. And if you can create an environment in which they flourish, which I think we have done in the United States probably too well, I think you're gonna have a very hyperactive sector.
Right. So you raised an interesting point there about maybe we've done this too well. So now we have these really very powerful tech companies in the US and in China and in India as well, and other markets. Do you think that these companies, these all-knowing companies, are too powerful? Is this the right way to go? Is to have these super apps? Is this the right way to go? Are these companies too powerful? What do you think?
Well, this may be politically incorrect, but as Daniel said early on when he started, Amazon was a startup. I remember when there were a lot of doubts as to whether it would succeed. I remember when Google was starting. People,
Yeah.
the insiders were fascinated, but no one else had ever heard of them. So I have a lot of sympathy for them. I mean, I remember we were talking about venture capital in Europe, and Europe has been spectacularly unsuccessful in generating new ideas. And part of that's the culture. And the only country that has been successful has been the UK, where someone said this to me, is they created a culture where someone could become really, 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 really rich. And that attracts people, like bears to honey or whatever. So I can't really criticize. I think truthfully, the people who criticize Google and Amazon and Facebook are just mad they didn't buy the stock. And obviously there's some other issues. I haven't looked closely at the the legal issues involved. And yes, maybe Microsoft and Google and some of the others have used some anti-competitive marketing techniques, but it's all credit to I have Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos and Steve Jobs. I mean, they built these companies, and I mean, Bezos may float around on his 600-yard yacht, but he earned it, and and people forget how many tens of thousands of jobs these companies have created.
Yeah.
I mean, they have created enormous wealth. So, if you want to be a sore loser, you can penalize them. But like I said, if they're doing something that's anti-competitive under the antitrust law, sure. But I think that they've done a remarkable job. I mean, Bezos figured out that the real key wasn't so much selling books, but developing a logistics network. And he's done that better than the U.S. Post Office.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so I want to bring up something else too on the content creation side. The free model versus the paid model. or the premium model? Where do you think this is going? It seems that many people want everything to be free online, right?
Sounds like the Democrats. Everything, something for nothing for everybody. But so I'm a great believer of in the paid model. When we had kiosk, or ABCJ, we were actually, I believe, the first to digitally distribute a magazine, and we just lowered the price to where people thought we were crazy, and it came back 10x. But I think you can't survive if you give too much stuff away for free. So I think there's a hybrid model where when you start out, sure, you want to give some stuff away, but ultimately you make a pricing decision, and it may be a very low pricing decision. But I think if you don't charge, you're going to be out of business.
Yeah, I mean, there's a value, right? People need to recognize that content creators, they create value. It's not something that happens by osmosis. There's actually a lot of IP behind it and a lot of thought that goes into it. And so, and my theory on this is, okay, if you offer everything for free, then, you know, people like on Zoom, if you have it free, right? Okay, it's free. So it doesn't matter whether I show up or not. But if I paid something, just maybe even $8 or $10, maybe I'll show up, right? So so I have kind of a bias in asking this question. But Daniel, what do you think? Where are we going? Where's content going? Is it we headed towards?
I think I'm going to be a little bit contrarian to both of you. I think the strongest media models have a mix of free and pay, where there's like some content that's free ad supported and some that's subscription. Okay. And I'm biased in that regard because I've spent a lot of time in TV in particular in the last 10 years. And that's TV is a sector that's done very well at straddling, at balancing the amount of revenue they get from ads with the amount they get from subscription. It's hard to balance that. That's what I think. I think it, because it's like a hedge. It's sort of like having non-correlated assets in a portfolio, you know?
Okay.
To have a little of both coming in if you can.
Sure, yeah. So you mentioned fintech earlier on, and as one of the areas with a lot of innovation. So, and I was just thinking about you know, all these platforms that have payment systems embedded in them, and is this partly what you're thinking about? Or when you mentioned that fintech is an area that's highly innovative, what were you thinking of?
What was the last part? Did you ask if I think it's
when
overrated?
You mentioned that fintech is a highly innovative area. What were you thinking of?
Well, there's a lot of new infrastructure that's being built that does things faster and cheaper than legacy banks and credit card companies.
Okay.
And in a lot of parts of the world, sorry, I have some distracting noise here. In a lot of parts of the world, it's actually leapfrogging what happened in the US because of mobile. So people, you know, like especially in Africa, like mobile money tied into your telecom plan. So I think a lot of the innovation has to do with at the infrastructure level.
I see.
You know, how money is moving and how credit is given and things like that.
I see. So yeah, are both of you big believers in blockchain?
I'm a bit of a bear. I'm a bit of a contrarian. I think a lot of it is overhyped, overrated. Most of my friends do not agree, and I have a lot of friends that made a lot of money from Bitcoin. But I think, you know, I think there are some good applications of blockchain. Foreign exchange currency is one that's interesting, but I think in general, there's a lot of investment dollars chasing not that much value at the moment, personally.
Yeah, again, my experience has been with, I said, this one company, Digital Currency Group, and blockchain has worked very well for them. I think your point, though, Daniel, is well taken. I think it's, again, it's like everything else. You have to see what it's being used for. And but what I think blockchain does is it introduces a whole new distribution network. And you know, it goes back to what I said earlier, and to actually one of the questions in the Q&A is who said he'd seen um, a lot of change going on, and quantum computing isn't going to happen next year, but the rate of innovation is so quick now
Yeah.
that again, I'm optimistic, and the real, I mean, every time we get a new company, I kind of have to hold, gasp at what I'm seeing, because it just is just leapfrogging what was there previously.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good. I think we're in a real innovative, super innovative era right now. So let me launch our poll. For those who have been on our program before, you know about the poll. So it's just anonymous. It's also just fun. So don't worry about it. Just simply answer the questions, and then I'm going to launch the poll. And then I'll read the questions too. And Dan, maybe you can chime in. I'm not sure you can see the poll. But how busy are you? Super busy, busy normal, or not so busy? This goes back to one of the questions I asked earlier about, are you busier now after COVID? And a lot of people said they're busier. And then what is your favorite news source? Newspaper, magazine, online, or print? Social media, TV, or radio? So far, everybody is weighing in. Oh, wow. Social media is not popular at all for a news source. Okay, that's kind of surprising to me. And now, who's the best media tech innovator? We talked a little bit about that, but most people are going to give Daniel's company the nod here. Amazon, Facebook, not so much. Twitter, not so much. Google is second. So if you haven't responded yet, please go ahead and respond. Okay. Well, I'm going to end the poll now, because I will share the results for everybody to see. There you go. And I'd like to thank our two Dans, Daniel and Dan, for joining us today. And I think there's one person on the line, Henry Wong, who wanted to speak with you more personally. So we'll let that happen more on a personal level. And then I would like to talk about our next programs. So we did the poll. Our next program is going to be with another New York person, Nihal Mehta, he is with a venture capital firm, or he has been, but now he's an angel investor himself. And his wife is a very famous lady who is the lady behind Girls Who Code. But Nihal is a very influential venture capitalist, angel investor. He knows a lot about global topics as well. So he's on next week. The following week, we have Jake Seed. So some of you may remember him from Lightspeed, but now since he's had a very big exit, he has set up his own fund, which is Stonebridge Ventures, and he'll be on again 4 p.m. Pacific time these next 2 weeks. Hopefully you'll join us. There's Nihal and there's Jake. Just check our website and you can sign up directly from there. So finally, just like to say thank you to Dan. Thank you so much. And Dan Schwartz, who I've known for many, many years, thank you for being on the program. You have a lot of fans out there. And Daniel, very nice to meet you here online.
Thanks,
really,
Rebecca.
Yeah, really enjoyed your remarks. And so let's stay in touch. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Rebecca, I want to thank you. You've done a tremendous job here, and continued good success.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, we have to tackle this freemium model.
Right. Good. Thank you.
I think we have to, that's the whole gist of it. But I mean, we have had a lot of support from many, many people who have been with us week after week since we had to go online. As you know, we were doing our events in person in many hotspots around the world. But then when COVID hit, that was it. We launched this Ask a VC series in April 2000, the year of
20.
COVID, the year of
2020.
2020. Right. So I have this up to remind me. It's probably backwards, but anyhow, there it is. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next week. And actually, I will be posting this on YouTube, so you can check it out there as well. So good evening, everyone. See you next time.
Hasta la
Bye.
vista. Right.
Hasta
Thank
la
you.
vista.